Here's how Insaf defends Deng in both Hajj Abdullah's home and on the plane, based on the actual text of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. 1. In Hajj Abdullah's home. After the Sharia court annuls their marriage, Insaf and Deng face hostility and manipulation from Hajj Abdullah's wife, Haja Maryam, who tries to turn Insaf against Deng by spreading rumors that Deng wants to marry one of her daughters. When Insaf is finally reunited with Deng in his hut, she realizes she has been deceived and defends Deng's love and loyalty in front of Hajj Abdullah and his wife. Direct quotes and summary. Insaf confronts Hajj Abdullah about the lies. Then the Arab wife, Insaf, turned her gaze away from her African husband, Deng, and faced her uncle, Hajj Abdullah. Your wife deceived me about my husband Deng. She made me believe that he is no longer interested in me and does not love me because the Sharia court separated me from him forever. Moreover, she lied to me when she told me that my black African husband wanted to marry her white Arab daughter, Safa. She explains why she will not leave Deng. I know you are a good man, but I want you to know that I do not see my African husband the same way others see him. For me, he is the perfect husband. Deng sacrificed his family relationship with his father and mother for the sake of his love for me. So, I love him sincerely just as he loves me with every cell in his body. She refuses to abandon Deng despite pressure. The Arab wife, Insaf, looked first at her African husband, Deng, and then turned her face toward her uncle, Hajj Abdullah. Her eyes are full of tears. She wiped away her tears before saying to the good old man, I cannot leave my husband and my home and go with you, my good uncle, Hajj Abdullah. She openly rejects the Sharia court's racist ruling. This is not true, uncle. The Sharia court ruling is a racist decision, and I do not believe in it. It justifies racial discrimination against African people. Muslims are treated as masters and slaves. Summary. Insaf stands up for Deng, exposes the lies told to her, and makes it clear to Hajj Abdullah and his wife that she will not abandon Deng, regardless of religious or social pressure. She affirms his sacrifices and her love, and she denounces the injustice of the Sharia court's decision. 2. On the plane. On the plane from Sudan to India, Insaf faces racist insults from Sudanese Arab flight attendants who mock Deng and suggest he is uncivilized and unworthy. Insaf defends Deng publicly and forcefully. Direct quotes. When the flight attendant says, Please close the plane door and let Mr. Deng Majok return to the African jungle in South Sudan where he came from and lives like a sloth monkey hanging between the trees. Insaf's response. The sarcastic racist words of the air hostess have struck the heart of the Arab wife Insaf like poisoned arrows. In response, she stood up from her seat and looked straight into the face of the rude Sudanese flight attendant. Then she shouted loudly, The late passenger, Mr. Deng Majok, is more civilized, educated, and honorable than you. The African Deng Majok is about to graduate from the University of Khartoum and become a doctor. His southern father is a first lieutenant general and a senior military official in the Sudanese army, and his Ethiopian mother is an English language teacher at the higher secondary school for girls in the city of Riyadh in Khartoum. He is my husband, and I am his wife, and I now carry his child in my womb with honor, pride, and dignity. When the flight attendant asks, Who are you addressing with these words, miss? I am speaking to you. Did I speak to you? You spoke very disgusting, hateful, and vulgar racist words against my African husband, Mr. Deng Majok. Summary. Insaf publicly rebukes the racist flight attendant, asserts Deng's dignity, education, and honor, and proudly claims him as her husband and the father of her child. She refuses to let the insults go unchallenged and makes a scene to defend Deng's reputation and their marriage. In essence, in Hajj Abdullah's home, Insaf exposes lies, affirms Deng's sacrifices, and refuses to abandon him, even when pressured by family and religious authority. On the plane, Insaf confronts racist insults head-on, loudly and proudly defending Deng's character, education, and their marriage in front of everyone. In the scenes where Insaf defends Deng, both in Haj Abdullah's home and on the plane, several major themes from The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed are powerfully highlighted. 1. Love as resistance. Theme: love is not just a personal feeling, but an act of rebellion against entrenched racism, patriarchy, and social norms. How it appears: Insaf's refusal to abandon Deng, even when pressured by family, religious authorities, or society, is a direct challenge to the systems that seek to keep them apart. Her public defense of Deng's dignity and their marriage is a form of resistance. 2. Racism and colorism. Theme: the destructive power of racism and colorism in Sudanese and broader society. How it appears: both scenes are saturated with racist insults and disbelief that a white Arab woman could love and marry a black African man. Insaf's defense of Deng is a rejection of these racist attitudes, and her willingness to confront them head-on exposes the deep prejudice of those around them. 3. Gender and female agency. Theme: women's agency in the face of patriarchal control and social manipulation. How it appears: Insaf is not a passive victim. She actively exposes lies, confronts manipulation, and makes her own choices about whom to love and stand by. Her voice and actions challenge the expectation that women should be obedient, silent, or complicit in their own oppression. 4. The fragility and conditionality of family and community support. Theme: family and community support is often conditional, especially when social norms are challenged. How it appears: in Haj Abdullah's home, support is withdrawn when Insaf refuses to conform. She is forced to choose between her husband and her surrogate family, and she chooses love and integrity over conditional acceptance. 5. Dignity and identity. Theme: the fight for personal dignity and the right to self-definition. How it appears: on the plane, Insaf's public defense of Deng is not just about him, it's about asserting her own dignity and the legitimacy of their union. She refuses to let others define her or her husband by racist or sexist stereotypes. 6. The cost of defiance. Theme: the personal and social cost of standing up to injustice. How it appears: in both scenes, Insaf's defense of Deng leads to further isolation, hostility, and risk. Yet, the narrative frames this as a necessary cost for living authentically and with integrity. 7. Hope and resilience. Theme: the enduring strength of hope and the human spirit in the face of relentless adversity. How it appears: despite repeated humiliation, threats, and betrayals, Insaf and Deng's bond endures. Their resilience is a quiet but powerful form of hope. Summary table. Theme: how it appears in these scenes. Love as resistance: Insaf's refusal to abandon Deng, public defense of their marriage. Racism and colorism: confronting racist insults, exposing prejudice in family and public spaces. Gender and agency: Insaf's active voice, confrontation of manipulation, making her own choices. Conditional family support withdrawn when norms are challenged, forced to choose between love and acceptance. Dignity and identity: public assertion of Deng's worth and their marriage, refusal to accept shame or erasure. Cost of defiance: social isolation, risk, and pain as the price of standing up for justice and love. Hope and resilience: enduring adversity together, refusing to give up on each other or on dignity. In essence, these scenes dramatize the novel's core themes: the courage to love against all odds, the fight against racism and patriarchy, the assertion of dignity, and the high cost, but ultimate necessity, of standing up for justice and for each other. Certainly, in The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, the themes highlighted in the scenes where Insaf defends Deng, such as love as resistance, racism and colorism, female agency, dignity, and the cost of defiance, evolve and deepen as the story progresses. Here's how these themes develop throughout the novel. 1. Love as resistance. Early in the story, love is secret, fragile, and forbidden. Insaf and Deng's relationship is innocent but must be hidden due to social and familial taboos. As the story progresses, their love becomes an act of open rebellion. Insaf's public defense of Deng, in Haj Abdullah's home and on the plain, marks a shift from private affection to public resistance. By the end, their love is not just personal but political, a challenge to the systems of racism, patriarchy, and religious dogma. Their eventual reunion and life together in exile is a testament to love's endurance and transformative power. 2. Racism and colorism. Early, racism is experienced as rumor, gossip, and family pressure. Insaf's father's refusal to accept Deng is rooted in deep-seated prejudice. Middle, racism becomes institutional and violent, manifesting in the annulment of their marriage by the Sharia court, public humiliation, and police harassment. Later, Insaf's public confrontations with the police, hotel staff, and flight attendants show her growing refusal to accept racist abuse. The narrative exposes the pervasiveness of colorism in both private and public life. And the couple's migration and eventual resettlement in Canada reflect both the persistence of racism, even in exile, and the hope for a more inclusive future. 3. Female agency and voice. Early, Insaf is a victim of patriarchal control, locked up, forced into marriage, silenced. Middle, she begins to assert herself, escaping, fighting back, and defending Deng and herself against slander and violence. Key scenes: her refusal to abandon Deng in Haj Abdullah's home and her public rebuke of the racist flight attendant are turning points, showing her transformation from passive victim to active agent. And Insaf's agency is fully realized as she claims her own identity, chooses her faith, and builds a new life on her own terms. 4. Dignity and identity. Early, Insaf's dignity is constantly under attack through public shaming, false accusations, and social ostracism. Middle, she learns to assert her dignity, refusing to accept shame or erasure. Her defense of Deng is also a defense of her own right to love and to define herself. And Insaf's journey is one of reclaiming her dignity, culminating in her refusal to be defined by others' prejudices or by her suffering. 5. The cost of defiance. Early, the cost is mostly emotional: fear, isolation, and longing. Middle, the cost becomes material and physical: imprisonment, violence, exile, and the loss of family and community. And the cost remains high: continued threats, trauma, and loss, but the narrative frames it as necessary for living authentically and with integrity. 6. Hope and resilience. Early, hope is fragile, often overshadowed by despair. Middle, hope is sustained through acts of solidarity, compassion from outsiders, and the couple's mutual support. And hope is realized in their survival, reunion, and the building of a new life, even as scars remain. How these themes intertwine and deepen. Intersectionality. As the story unfolds, these themes become more intertwined. Racism and patriarchy are shown to reinforce each other. Love and agency become acts of resistance. Dignity is reclaimed through defiance. From individual to universal, what begins as a personal story of two lovers becomes a broader indictment of social, legal, and religious systems that perpetuate injustice. From survival to transformation, the journey moves from mere survival to transformation of self, of relationships, and of the meaning of justice and belonging. In summary, the themes highlighted in the scenes where Insaf defends Deng evolve from private struggles to public acts of resistance and transformation. The novel traces the journey from victimhood to agency, from isolation to solidarity, and from despair to hope, showing that the fight for love, dignity, and justice is both deeply personal and profoundly political. Certainly. Here's a comparison of the early and late portrayals of Insaf in The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, based on the actual content of the novel. Early portrayal of Insaf. 1. Innocence and vulnerability. Insaf is introduced as a beautiful, intelligent, and obedient teenage girl from a conservative Arab Muslim family in Sudan. She is depicted as innocent, sheltered, and largely passive. Her life is controlled by her father and shaped by social and religious expectations. 2. Victim of patriarchy and racism. She is subjected to severe punishments for her love for Deng, locked in her room, her hair shaved, forcibly circumcised, and subjected to a virginity test. She is forced into an arranged marriage with an elderly man, Haj Taha, and is powerless to resist her family's decisions. 3. Powerlessness and shame. Insaf is repeatedly shamed and blamed for circumstances beyond her control, rumors of adultery, the birth of a bastard child, murder accusations. She is isolated, traumatized, and often silent. Her agency is almost entirely denied. 4. Survival instinct. Her early acts of resistance are desperate and reactive, fleeing from her family, running from forced marriage, and killing Haj Taha in self-defense. Late portrayal of Insaf. 1. Agency and defiance. Insaf evolves into a woman who actively asserts her voice and agency. She openly defends Deng in front of family, religious authorities, and the public, refusing to abandon him even when threatened with disownment or violence. 2. Public resistance. She confronts racist and sexist insults directly, e.g., on the plane, in public spaces, and in Haj Abdullah's home. She stands up to religious and legal authorities, denouncing the Sharia court's ruling as racist and unjust. 3. Self-definition and dignity. Insaf reclaims her dignity, refusing to accept the shame imposed on her by others. She chooses her own path, embracing a new faith, building a new family, and living authentically despite exile and trauma. 4. Resilience and hope. Despite immense suffering, Insaf becomes a symbol of resilience and hope. She finds strength in her love for Deng, her children, and the support of compassionate outsiders, like the Matthew family. Key contrasts. Aspect early Insaf, late Insaf. Agency passive, controlled by others active, asserts her choices and voice. Identity defined by family, religion, and shame self-defined, claims dignity and new identity. Response to injustice endures, internalizes shame, confronts, resists, and denounces injustice. Relationship to Deng's secret, fearful, forbidden public, defiant, source of strength. Relationship to society seeks acceptance, fears ostracism, accepts exile, prioritizes love and integrity. Emotional state fearful, traumatized, isolated, resilient, hopeful, empowered. Representative quotes. Early. She is locked in her room for months, her hair is shaved, and she is forcibly circumcised a second time. She is cut off from all social contact, forbidden from seeing friends, attending school, or even leaving her home. Late. But auntie, I cannot listen to the ruling of those racist religious men in the Sharia court and leave my legitimate Muslim husband. I am his lawful Muslim wife, and I carry his child in my womb, and I love him very much. She stood up from her seat and looked straight into the face of the rude Sudanese flight attendant. Then she shouted loudly, "The late passenger, Mr. Deng Majok, is more civilized, educated, and honorable than you. He is my husband, and I am his wife, and I now carry his child in my womb with honor, pride, and dignity." How the change happens. Catalysts, repeated betrayals, injustices, and the support of a few compassionate allies force Insaf to find her own strength. Turning points, her public defense of Deng, her refusal to accept the Sharia court's annulment, and her confrontation with racist authorities mark her transformation. Resolution. By the end, Insaf is no longer defined by victimhood, but by her courage, resilience, and the authenticity of her love and choices. In summary, Insaf's journey is one from victimhood and silence to agency and self-definition. Early in the novel, she is a passive recipient of injustice. By the end, she is a powerful agent of her own destiny, willing to stand alone for love, dignity, and justice. Drawing from the content of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, Insaf's influence on other characters is profound and multifaceted. Here's how her presence, choices, and resilience shape those around her throughout the novel. 1. Dang, her lover/husband, inspires loyalty and sacrifice. Insaf's courage and steadfastness inspire Dang to defy his own family, sell his car, drop out of medical school, and risk everything to defend her. Her suffering and resilience deepen his love and sense of responsibility, motivating him to fight for her innocence even when it costs him his family and future. Catalyst for his growth. Through Insaf, Dang learns about the depth of injustice in society and becomes more outspoken and courageous, especially in challenging Sharia law and racial prejudice. 2. Haj Abdullah and family. Challenges compassion and conformity. Insaf's vulnerability and dignity initially awaken compassion in Haj Abdullah, who shelters her and treats her as a daughter. However, her refusal to abandon Dang and her resistance to unjust rulings force the family to confront the limits of their compassion and the pressures of social conformity. Exposes prejudice. Her presence exposes latent racism and conditionality in the family, especially in Haja Maryam, who becomes hostile and manipulative as Insaf refuses to conform. 3. Religious and legal authorities. Provokes defensive and punitive reactions. Insaf's refusal to submit quietly to injustice, her public resistance, and her eventual conversion challenge the authority of religious and legal leaders. They respond with increased rigidity, public shaming, and harsh punishments, revealing the system's fragility when confronted by a determined individual. 4. The Matthew family, Indian Christian family, inspires empathy and moral courage. Insaf's suffering and integrity move the Matthew family to risk social, financial, and legal consequences to protect her. Her story challenges them to act on their values of compassion and justice, even when their community disapproves, deepens their faith and solidarity. Her gratitude and eventual spiritual journey strengthen the family's sense of purpose and solidarity, reinforcing their belief in unconditional love and the importance of standing with the vulnerable. 5. Sudanese diaspora and student community. Polarizes and exposes hypocrisy. Insaf's choices, especially her marriage to Dang, her public resistance, and her conversion, polarize the Sudanese student community. She becomes a lightning rod for debates about race, gender, and religion, exposing the hypocrisy and double standards of those who judge her. Inspires quiet admiration. While many slander or ostracize her, some marginalized or secular students quietly admire her courage and resilience, even if they cannot openly support her. 6. International advocates, e.g. Jennifer Beals, UN legal advisor. Motivates advocacy and action. Insaf's plight moves international advocates to go beyond bureaucratic procedures, searching for evidence, challenging embassies, and risking professional consequences to save her from extradition and execution. 7. Her own family. Forces reckoning with tradition. Insaf's defiance and refusal to accept forced marriage, violence, and injustice force her family to confront the consequences of their actions and the limits of their authority, even if they ultimately reject her. Summary table. Insaf's influence on other characters. Character/group, how Insaf influences them. Dang inspires loyalty, sacrifice, and growth, deepens his courage and sense of justice. Haj Abdullah and family awakens compassion, exposes prejudice, forces confrontation with social/religious norms. Religious/legal authorities provokes defensive, punitive reactions, exposes systems' rigidity and hypocrisy. Matthew family inspires empathy, moral courage, and solidarity, deepens their faith and sense of justice. Sudanese diaspora/students polarizes community, exposes hypocrisy, inspires quiet admiration among some. International advocates motivates advocacy, action, and risk-taking beyond bureaucratic duty. Her own family forces reckoning with tradition, exposes limits of parental authority. In essence, Insaf's journey from victimhood to agency is not just her own, it acts as a catalyst, mirror, and challenge for everyone around her. Her resilience, defiance, and capacity for love force others to confront their own values, prejudices, and the boundaries of their compassion or cruelty. Based on the actual content of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, Insaf's conversion from Islam to Christianity provokes a wide range of intense reactions from other characters and communities. Here's a detailed summary of those reactions, with direct references to the novel. 1. Sudanese Muslim community and diaspora. Hostility, outrage, and threats. Insaf's conversion is seen as the ultimate betrayal, not just of religion, but of family, tribe, and nation. She is labeled an apostate, murtada, which in Sudanese Sharia law is a capital crime. Religious leaders and student groups issue fatwas and public threats against her, calling for her death. The Sudanese embassy in India and the UK actively pursue her extradition, specifically citing her apostasy as grounds for execution. Direct quote, "Do you know what we should do to a Muslim girl like you who spilled the bright name of Sudan and brought shame to Islam? We must return her to Sudan as quickly as possible. When she arrives there, she must be tried before the Sharia court, convicted, and hanged to death for her apostasy from Islam and turning into an impure, infidel Christian woman." Social ostracism and slander. Insaf is abandoned by her family, former friends, and even many in the Sudanese diaspora. She is only protected by non-Muslim allies. She is slandered, called a prostitute and a traitor, and is shunned by her own people. 2. Religious leaders and authorities. Legal and religious persecution. Religious authorities in Sudan and among the diaspora see her conversion as a crime deserving the harshest punishment. The Minister of Religious Affairs in Sudan revokes her presidential pardon, specifically because of her conversion. Direct quote, "The Minister of Religious Affairs and other religious authorities have the power to override even presidential pardons, as seen when Insaf's pardon is revoked on religious grounds." 3. Sudanese student community in India. Public shaming and violence. When Insaf is seen wearing a cross in the student cafeteria, the leader of Ansar al-Sunnah al-Mohammadiyya confronts her, tries to snatch her cross, and publicly declares her an apostate. The confrontation escalates to violence. Insaf slaps the leader when he tries to humiliate her, and he issues a public fatwa against her. Direct quote, "His hand could not hold the gold chain, but rather wandered around Insaf's chest and touched one of her half-naked breasts. She pulled herself back, raised her right hand as much as she could, and brought it down forcefully on the leader's face." The religious leader of Ansar al-Sunnah held his cheek with one hand. He roars like a wounded lion or grunts like a raging camel and jumps over the apostate Muslim girl who became an infidel Christian woman and tears her into pieces like a wild beast tearing the flesh of a helpless prey. However, the religious leader opened his vile mouth and issued his religious fatwa: "This cross that you are wearing around your unclean neck and the slap you gave to my pure face will cost you your life." 4. Indian Christian community, Matthew family. Compassion, acceptance, and solidarity. The Matthew family and their close circle in India respond with unconditional compassion and support. They never pressure her to convert, but when she does, they accept her as family. Her conversion is seen as a personal and spiritual liberation, not a scandal. Direct quote, "Within a few months, Insaf blossomed like a beautiful rose in that loving and well-cared-for home." The Muslim wife found a significant difference between the love of the Indian Christian family and the persecution of the Sudanese Christian family. 5. Western/international community. Legal protection and human rights advocacy. Western authorities and UN officials see Insaf's conversion as a matter of personal freedom and human rights. They intervene to protect her from extradition and execution, refusing to recognize apostasy as a crime. Direct quote, "Not in this secular Western country. Therefore, Your request to hand over the Sudanese detainee Insaf Salah al-Junaid to Sudan to be killed because she abandoned Islam and embraced Christianity is a violation of human rights and cannot be met. 6. Deng and close allies. Support and admiration. Deng, her husband, and the Matthew family support her decision and stand by her, even at great personal risk. Her courage in claiming her faith inspires admiration and deepens their solidarity. Summary table. Reactions to Insaf's conversion. Group reaction. Sudanese Muslim community hostility, threats, ostracism, calls for execution. Religious leaders/authorities legal/religious persecution, revocation of pardon, fatwas. Sudanese students, India, public shaming, violence, fatwas, mob mentality. Indian Christian family compassion, acceptance, solidarity, no pressure. Western/international legal protection, human rights advocacy, refusal to extradite. Deng and close allies support, admiration, increased solidarity. In essence, Insaf's conversion is a turning point that exposes the deep intolerance and violence of her former community, but also brings her into a circle of genuine compassion and solidarity. The reactions range from deadly hostility and legal persecution to unconditional acceptance and protection, highlighting the novel's themes of religious freedom, courage, and the cost of authenticity. Certainly. Here's a focused summary of how Deng defends Insaf in the key scenes you mentioned, based on the content of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. 1. In Deng's house, the hut in the shanty town. When Deng and Insaf are living together in poverty after their marriage is annulled by the Sharia court, Deng's father, Mr. Majak Nasser, visits him. The father is shocked by Deng's living conditions and blames Insaf for all the family's misfortunes, calling her a criminal, murderer, thief, and dirty prostitute. Deng, in tears, defends Insaf by explaining that she did not leave him willingly, but was forced away by the Sharia court due to racial prejudice. He insists that Insaf never saw him as inferior and that their love was genuine. When his father offers reconciliation only if Deng abandons Insaf, Deng refuses, stating he will protect her and their child at any cost, even if it means being disowned. Quote, Insaf did not leave me willingly. The Sharia court's annulment of our marriage was due to racial prejudice. She never saw me as inferior, and our love was genuine and mutual. I will protect her and our child, even if it means being disowned by you, father. 2. With Siham Khalil, the lawyer. Deng's most active defense of Insaf is his decision to hire Siham Khalil, a bold feminist lawyer, to represent her in court. He sells his car to pay for her legal fees and works closely with Siham, providing information, gathering evidence, and even traveling with her to different cities to investigate the charges against Insaf. Deng's loyalty and willingness to sacrifice his own future for Insaf's defense is a central act of advocacy. Quote, No matter what happens to me, I will not back down because I am confident in your defense ability to prove the innocence of my suspected Arab friend Insaf. 3. In the hotel, honeymoon, and public spaces. After their marriage, Deng and Insaf face open racism and suspicion when trying to check into hotels for their honeymoon. The hotel staff and guests refuse to believe they are married, demand proof, and mock Deng for being a black African with a white Arab wife. Deng defends Insaf by insisting on their right to be together, presenting their marriage certificate, and confronting the staff's prejudice. When the certificate is torn up by police, Deng continues to assert their legitimacy and refuses to let Insaf be shamed or accused of prostitution. Quote, This is my wife, Insaf. We got married today. If you don't believe me, you can ask her. We are a legally married couple, and we have a house. Come with us in the police car to the place where we live in the Al-Ashash neighborhood and see our hut. 4. With 2 police officers on the riverbank. While sitting together on the riverbank, Deng and Insaf are confronted by 2 Arab police officers who accuse them of indecency and demand proof of marriage. Deng presents their marriage certificate, which the officers tear up, calling it fake. They accuse Insaf of being a prostitute. Dang defends Insaf by insisting on their marriage, challenging the officer's racism, and refusing to let them humiliate or arrest her. Only after Haj Abdullah confirms their marriage do the officers relent. Quote, Insaf is neither a street girl nor a hooker hired to engage in prostitution. She is my lawful Muslim wife, and I am her legal Muslim husband. 5. In the house of the Imam, who conducted their marriage. After the Sharia court annuls their marriage, Dang and Haj Abdullah visit the Imam who performed their wedding. Dang seeks the Imam's support and tries to defend the legitimacy of their marriage, arguing that their union was conducted according to Islamic law and that the annulment is unjust and rooted in racism. The Imam, however, explains the legal technicalities and the influence of tribal prejudice in the court's decision. Dang continues to assert that their marriage is valid and that the annulment is a product of social injustice, not religious principle. Quote, How can I leave the girl I love and divorce her and go marry another girl I don't love? The Sharia court sentence is stronger than the criminal court's verdict. But I will not give up on my wife. Summary table. Scene/setting Dang's defense of Insaf. Dang's house defends her against his father's accusations, refuses to abandon her, asserts their love and loyalty. With Siham Khalil hires and supports the lawyer, sells car for legal fees, gathers evidence, stands by Insaf in court. In the hotel insists on their marriage, confronts racism, refuses to let Insaf be shamed or accused of prostitution. With police officers presents marriage certificate, challenges accusations, insists on their legitimacy as a married couple. Imam's house argues for the validity of their marriage, challenges the annulment as unjust and rooted in prejudice. If you'd like direct quotes from any of these scenes or a deeper analysis of Dang's advocacy for Insaf, let me know. Here's a breakdown of the key themes that are brought to the forefront in these moments. 1. Racism and colorism. Manifestation. Dang and Insaf's relationship is constantly challenged by deep-seated racial prejudice. Dang is repeatedly called a black Negro slave, and their marriage is viewed as unnatural or shameful by both families and society. In the scenes, in the hotel, police station, and even in their own home, the couple faces open hostility, disbelief, and humiliation simply because of their racial and tribal backgrounds. 2. Social and legal injustice. Manifestation. The law, especially Sharia courts, and social institutions are shown to reinforce and legitimize prejudice. The annulment of their marriage, the destruction of their marriage certificate, and the threat of flogging or stoning are all examples of systemic injustice. In the scenes, Dang's defense of Insaf is not just personal, it is a fight against a legal and social system that is stacked against them. 3. Gender and patriarchy. Manifestation. Insaf is denied agency over her own life and body. She is subjected to forced marriage, public shaming, and is blamed for the couple's suffering. In the scenes, Dang's defense often involves standing up to patriarchal figures, his own father, police, religious authorities, who see Insaf as a source of shame or as property to be controlled. 4. Love as resistance. Manifestation. The central love story is depicted as an act of rebellion against racism, patriarchy, and religious intolerance. Dang's unwavering loyalty and willingness to sacrifice for Insaf is a form of resistance. In the scenes, each time Dang defends Insaf, whether in private or public, against family or authority, he is asserting the legitimacy and dignity of their love in the face of overwhelming opposition. 5. Isolation and social ostracism. Manifestation. The couple is repeatedly isolated, cut off from family, community, and support networks. Even those who initially offer help, like Haj Abdullah's family, withdraw support under social pressure. In the scenes, the refusal of hotels, the destruction of their marriage certificate, and the threats from police and religious authorities all reinforce their isolation. 6. Courage and moral integrity. Manifestation. Dang's willingness to stand up for Insaf, even at great personal cost, highlights the theme of moral courage. He refuses to abandon her, even when pressured by family, society, and the law. In the scenes, Deng's actions, hiring Siham Khalil, confronting police, and arguing with religious authorities, demonstrate a commitment to justice and personal integrity. 7. Hypocrisy and corruption in authority. Manifestation, religious and legal authorities are depicted as self-serving, corrupt, and hypocritical, using their power to maintain social hierarchies rather than to deliver justice. In the scenes, the imam's refusal to support their marriage, the police's destruction of legal documents, and the Sharia court's racialized annulment all expose the hypocrisy of those in power. Summary table. Theme: how it appears in these scenes. Racism and colorism open hostility, disbelief, and slurs against Deng and Insaf's union. Social/legal injustice, annulment of marriage, destruction of documents, threat of punishment. Gender and patriarchy, Insaf's lack of agency, blame, and control by male figures. Love as resistance, Deng's defense as an act of rebellion and affirmation of their love. Isolation and ostracism, social exclusion, loss of support, forced to stand alone. Courage and integrity, Deng's sacrifices, refusal to abandon Insaf, moral stand. Hypocrisy/corruption, authorities' manipulation of law/religion for control, not justice. In essence, these scenes dramatize how love, dignity, and justice are constantly under siege by racism, patriarchy, and corrupt authority, but also how acts of courage and solidarity can challenge and resist these forces, even at great personal cost. Certainly. Let's explore the theme of love as resistance in The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, especially as it emerges in the scenes where Deng defends Insaf. Love as resistance, an in-depth exploration. 1. Love against social and racial barriers. Context: Deng and Insaf's relationship is forbidden not just by their families, but by the entire social order of Sudanese society, which is deeply divided by race, tribe, and religion. Resistance: their love itself is an act of defiance. By choosing each other, they challenge the entrenched racism and colorism that dictate who is worthy of love and marriage. Every time Deng stands up for Insaf, against his own father, against the police, in public spaces, he is refusing to accept the social script that says their union is abominable. Insaf did not leave me willingly. The Sharia court's annulment of our marriage was due to racial prejudice. She never saw me as inferior, and our love was genuine and mutual. I will protect her and our child, even if it means being disowned by you, Father. 2. Love against patriarchy and gender oppression. Context: Insaf is repeatedly denied agency, locked up, forced into marriage, subjected to public shaming and violence. Resistance: Deng's defense of Insaf is not just about romantic love, it is a stand against the patriarchal system that treats women as property and scapegoats. By hiring Siham Khalil, a feminist lawyer, and by refusing to abandon Insaf even when pressured by family and society, Deng is resisting the expectation that men should uphold patriarchal norms at the expense of women's dignity. 3. Love against legal and religious injustice. Context: the Sharia court annuls their marriage, the police destroy their marriage certificate, and both face threats of flogging, stoning, or execution. Resistance: Deng's unwavering support for Insaf, insisting on the validity of their marriage, refusing to let her be shamed or criminalized, and fighting for her legal defense, turns their love into a form of protest against unjust laws and corrupt authorities. Their relationship becomes a battleground for the right to dignity and self-determination. 4. Love as a source of agency and survival. Context: both characters are repeatedly isolated, betrayed, and left without support. Resistance: their love gives them the strength to endure exile, imprisonment, and public humiliation. It motivates Deng to sell his car, drop out of medical school, and risk everything for Insaf's freedom. For Insaf, Deng's loyalty is a lifeline that helps her survive trauma and reclaim her voice. 5. Love as a challenge to community and family. Context: both families and communities demand that Deng and Insaf conform, abandon each other, and accept their assigned roles. Resistance: by choosing each other over family, tribe, and even personal safety, Deng and Insaf assert that love can and should transcend the boundaries imposed by others. Their union is a living critique of the hypocrisy and cruelty of those who claim to act in the name of honor, religion, or tradition. Key moments illustrating love as resistance. Scene/setting how love functions as resistance. Deng's house refusing to abandon Insaf despite family threats and disownment. With Siham Khalil mobilizing legal defense, challenging the system for Insaf. In the hotel insisting on their right to be together, confronting public racism. With police officers defending their marriage, refusing to let Insaf be criminalized. Imam's house arguing for the legitimacy of their love against religious law. Conclusion: love as a revolutionary act. In The Abominable Love, love is not a private or apolitical feeling, it is a revolutionary act. Deng and Insaf's commitment to each other is a direct challenge to the forces of racism, patriarchy, and religious intolerance. Their love is a refusal to be defined by others' hatred, and a declaration that dignity, justice, and hope are worth fighting for even when the world calls that love abominable. If you'd like, I can provide direct quotes from the novel or explore how this theme evolves in later chapters. Drawing from the content of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, the reactions of others to Deng and Insaf's love are central to the novel's conflict and message. Here's a detailed exploration of how various groups and individuals respond to their relationship. 1. Family reactions. Insaf's family, Arab, Northern Sudanese. Hostility and violence. Insaf's family reacts with outrage and violence when they discover her love for Deng, a black African from the Dinka tribe. Her father locks her away, shaves her head, forces her to undergo a second genital mutilation, and arranges a forced marriage to an elderly Arab man. Shame and scapegoating. The family sees her relationship as a source of shame and scandal, blaming her for dishonoring them and for the subsequent tragedies that befall the family. Deng's family, African Southern Sudanese. Skepticism and disapproval. Deng's parents are wary of the relationship, fearing the social stigma and racial prejudice that come with their son marrying an Arab girl. Conditional support and rejection. When Deng refuses to abandon Insaf, his parents threaten to disown him and eventually expel him from the family home, blaming Insaf for his misfortunes. 2. Community and society. Sudanese society. Racism and ostracism. The broader community, both in Sudan and in the diaspora, reacts with racism, calling Deng a black Negro slave and viewing their love as abominable. The couple is ostracized, slandered, and subjected to public humiliation. Legal and religious condemnation. The Sharia court annuls their marriage on the grounds of tribal inadequacy, and religious authorities threaten them with flogging or stoning if they remain together. Diaspora communities, India, UK, Canada. Continued prejudice. Even in exile, Sudanese students and diaspora communities slander Insaf, call her a prostitute and drug dealer, and physically attack her. Deng and Insaf are isolated and denied support. Mob mentality. In India, for example, Sudanese students publicly insult Insaf in court, and when she defends herself, she is further ostracized. 3. Authority figures. Police and legal authorities. Harassment and injustice. Police officers destroy their marriage certificate, accuse Insaf of prostitution, and threaten them with arrest. Legal authorities in Sudan, India, and the UK are often complicit in their persecution, either through direct action or by upholding discriminatory laws. Religious leaders. Condemnation and threats. Religious leaders denounce their relationship as sinful and shameful, issue fatwas against Insaf when she converts to Christianity, and call for her execution as an apostate. 4. Individuals who show compassion. Haj Abdullah's family, initially. Conditional compassion. Haj Abdullah rescues Insaf from starvation and treats her as a daughter, But this support is withdrawn when social and legal pressures mount, and the family ultimately disowns her for refusing to abandon Deng. Matthew family, Indian Christians in Bombay. Unconditional support. In contrast, the Matthew family in India offers Insaf unconditional compassion, sheltering her and her child, defending her against threats, and helping her escape to safety, even at great personal risk. 5. Summary table. Group/individual reaction to Deng and Insaf's love. Insaf's family hostility, violence, forced marriage, disownment. Deng's family skepticism, conditional support, eventual rejection. Sudanese society racism, ostracism, legal/religious condemnation, mob action. Diaspora communities continued prejudice, slander, physical and social isolation. Police/legal authorities harassment, destruction of documents, threats, legal persecution. Religious leaders condemnation, fatwas, calls for execution. Haj Abdullah's family initial compassion, later manipulation and disownment. Matthew family, India, unconditional support, protection, advocacy. Key insights. Most reactions are negative. The overwhelming response is one of hostility, prejudice, and violence, rooted in racism, patriarchy, and religious intolerance. Love as a threat. Their relationship is seen as a threat to family honor, social order, and religious norms. Rare compassion. True, unconditional support comes only from outsiders, the Matthew family, highlighting the rarity and value of genuine empathy. Isolation and resilience. The couple's isolation is both a source of suffering and a crucible for their resilience and solidarity. Religion plays a central and multifaceted role in shaping the reactions to Deng and Insaf's love in The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. Here's a detailed exploration, grounded in the actual content of the novel. 1. Religion as a source of authority and social control. Islamic law Sharia. The novel's Sudanese setting is governed by strict interpretations of Islamic law. Sharia is not just a personal faith, but the legal and moral code that dictates marriage, sexuality, family honor, and social hierarchy. Marriage annulment. The Sharia court annuls Deng and Insaf's marriage, citing tribal inadequacy and lack of guardian consent, even though both are Muslims. The court's decision is justified with Quranic verses and hadiths, showing how religious doctrine is used to enforce racial and social boundaries. Punishments. The threat of flogging, stoning, and even execution for adultery or apostasy is ever present, and these punishments are explicitly justified by religious texts. Religious leaders. Imams, judges, and religious authorities are depicted as powerful enforcers of social norms. They use their religious status to condemn the couple's relationship as sinful and shameful. Issue fatwas, religious rulings, calling for Insaf's punishment when she converts to Christianity. Override even presidential pardons, as seen when the Minister of Religious Affairs cancels Insaf's pardon due to her apostasy. 2. Religion as a justification for prejudice and exclusion. Racial and tribal prejudice. Religious arguments are used to legitimize racism and colorism. The Sharia court's annulment of the marriage is not just about faith, but about compatibility kafah between tribes, a concept rooted in both religious and social tradition. Quote, "In this case, we can dissolve their marriage according to the Sharia law of inadequacy between the wife and her husband," the chief judge said. Gender oppression. Religious doctrine is invoked to justify the control of women's bodies and choices. Insaf's father claims the right to choose her husband, and the court upholds this as a religious duty. 3. Religion as a tool for social ostracism and violence. Community surveillance. The mosque and religious leaders play a central role in policing morality. Gossip, rumor, and collective judgment are couched in religious language, and the community's sense of honor is deeply tied to religious law. Apostasy and conversion. When Insaf converts to Christianity, the reaction is not just personal, but religiously charged. She is declared an apostate, and religious leaders call for her execution, citing the hadith, "Whoever changes his religion, kill him." 4. Religion as a source of hypocrisy and corruption. Manipulation by authorities. The novel is critical of religious leaders who use faith to justify their own power and prejudice. Both Muslim and Christian leaders are shown to be capable of manipulation, exclusion, and even violence in the name of religion. Selective application. Religious law is applied inconsistently, often to protect the powerful and punish the vulnerable. For example, men's transgressions are often overlooked, while women like Insaf are harshly punished. 5. Contrasts between religious communities. Conditional versus unconditional compassion. Sudanese Muslim and Christian communities, both are depicted as offering conditional acceptance. Help is withdrawn when Insaf's past or choices become known. Indian Christian family. In contrast, the Matthew family in India offers unconditional support, motivated by a more inclusive and compassionate interpretation of their faith. Summary table. Religion's role in reactions. Aspect: how religion shapes reactions. Authority and law. Sharia court. Religious leaders. Legal punishments. Justification for prejudice. Racial, tribal, and gender exclusion justified by religious texts. Social ostracism. Community shaming. Fatwas. Threats of violence. Hypocrisy and corruption. Manipulation by religious authorities. Selective enforcement. Conditional compassion. Help withdrawn when religious/social norms are violated. Contrasts in practice. Rigid exclusion versus inclusive compassion. India versus Sudan. Key insights. Religion is not just a private matter but a public, legal, and social force that shapes every aspect of Deng and Insaf's ordeal. Religious doctrine is used to justify and enforce racism, patriarchy, and exclusion, but also to provide a language for compassion and solidarity, as seen in the Indian Christian family. The novel critiques the hypocrisy and selective application of religious law, showing how it can be manipulated to serve power rather than justice. Here's an exploration of the role of imams in the plot of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, based directly on the content of your document. 1. Imams as enforcers of religious and social order. Imams in the novel are not just spiritual leaders, they are powerful figures who enforce both religious law, Sharia, and social norms. Their authority extends into the legal, familial, and communal spheres, making them central to the fate of Deng and Insaf. Key examples. Marriage annulment. The Sharia court, led by 3 elderly imams, Maulana Yasin, Maulana Sharif al-Din, and Maulana Alamin, annuls Deng and Insaf's marriage. They cite religious law, specifically the doctrine of kafah compatibility, to declare the marriage invalid due to tribal and racial differences. The imam's decision is not just legal, but deeply social, reinforcing the boundaries between Arab and African, North and South, and upholding the authority of the father as guardian. In this case, we can dissolve their marriage according to the Sharia law of inadequacy between the wife and her husband, the chief judge said. Guardianship and women's agency. The imams uphold the principle that a virgin Muslim woman cannot marry without her father's consent. They reject the legitimacy of Haj Abdullah acting as Insaf's guardian, reinforcing patriarchal control and denying Insaf agency over her own life. A woman is completely ineligible to conclude a marriage contract, whether for herself or someone else, even if her guardian gives her permission to do so. 2. Imams as gatekeepers of racial and tribal purity. The imams' rulings are explicitly racialized. They openly express that a free white Arab girl should not marry a black African Negro slave and use religious doctrine to justify the annulment of the marriage. Racial prejudice. The Imam's language and decisions reinforce the social hierarchy that places Arabs above Africans, and their authority gives religious legitimacy to these prejudices. So, you rejected this black Muslim boy because your daughter is Arab and he is an African man? Haj Salah answered frankly, yes, this is the truth. My daughter is a free, white Arab girl, and this black boy is a Southern Dinka Negro slave. 3. Imams as legal authorities and judges. Imams serve as judges in the Sharia court, wielding the power to decide the fate of marriages, family disputes, and even criminal cases. Their rulings are final and presented as divinely inspired, leaving little room for appeal or compassion.
Public spectacle.
The Imam's court sessions are public, didactic, and performative, intended to serve as warnings and lessons to the community about the consequences of defying religious and social norms. We, the 3 members of this blessed court of Allah and His Messenger, announce from today onwards the annulment of the marriage contract between Deng Majak Nasser and Insaf, the daughter of Haj Salah al-Junaid, based on the law of inadequacy or insufficiency between the tribe of the husband and the tribe of the wife. 4. Imams as obstacles to justice and compassion. While imams are supposed to be moral and spiritual guides, in the novel they are often depicted as rigid, prejudiced, and more concerned with upholding tradition than with justice or empathy. Resistance to change. Even when confronted with the suffering of Deng and Insaf, the Imams refuse to show flexibility or compassion, insisting on the letter of the law and the preservation of social order. Hypocrisy and power. The Imam's authority is shown to be susceptible to hypocrisy and manipulation, as they sometimes use religious doctrine to serve personal or political interests rather than true justice. 5. Imams as barriers to love and individual freedom. The Imam's rulings and attitudes are central obstacles to Deng and Insaf's love. Their decisions force the couple into exile, criminalize their relationship, and ultimately drive them to seek refuge outside Sudan. Summary table. Roles of Imams in the plot. Role/function, how it manifests in the plot. Enforcers of law and norms annul marriages, uphold guardianship, dictate women's choices. Gatekeepers of racial purity use doctrine to justify racial/tribal boundaries. Legal authorities serve as judges, issue final and public rulings. Obstacles to justice rigid, unyielding, prioritize tradition over compassion. Barriers to love/freedom criminalize and punish cross-racial love, force couple into exile. Conclusion. Imams in the abominable love are not just religious figures, they are the embodiment of the intersection between faith, law, and social power. Their actions and decisions drive much of the conflict in the novel, making them both the voice and the enforcer of the systems that Deng and Insaf must resist to survive and love freely. Certainly. Here's a comparative analysis of imams and other authority figures in The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, based directly on the novel's content.
Imam.
Role and characteristics. Religious legal authority. Imams in the novel serve as judges in the Sharia court, wielding immense power over marriage, family, and personal status. Enforcers of tradition. They uphold and enforce religious law, Sharia, often prioritizing tradition, tribal compatibility, and patriarchal norms over individual justice or compassion. Public moralists. Their rulings are public, didactic, and intended to reinforce social order and religious conformity. Racial and gender bias. Imams openly express and legitimize racial prejudice, e.g., annulling Deng and Insaf's marriage due to tribal inadequacy, and reinforce gender hierarchies, e.g., denying women agency in marriage. Impact on protagonists. Obstacles to love and freedom. Their decisions directly criminalize and punish Deng and Insaf's relationship, forcing them into exile and legal peril. Final authority. Their rulings are presented as divinely inspired and nearly impossible to challenge or overturn. Other authority figures. 1. Police officers. Role: enforcers of state law and public order. Characteristics. Racial and gender prejudice. Police destroy Dang and Insaf's marriage certificate, accuse Insaf of prostitution, and threaten arrest, often acting on personal bias rather than objective law. Corruption and violence. Some officers are depicted as corrupt, violent, and willing to abuse their power for personal gain or to uphold social prejudices. Impact. Police harassment compounds the couple's vulnerability, and their actions often reinforce the imam's rulings rather than provide protection or justice. 2. Judges, secular/criminal courts. Role: adjudicate criminal cases, including murder, theft, and drug charges. Characteristics: influenced by social and religious norms. Even in secular courts, judges are shown to be swayed by public opinion, religious arguments, and social expectations. Potential for fairness. There are moments where secular judges are more open to evidence and legal argument, e.g., Siham Khalil's defense, but their decisions are still constrained by the broader context of religious law and social pressure. Impact. Secular courts sometimes offer a glimmer of hope for justice, but are ultimately limited by the dominance of Sharia and community norms. 3. Religious leaders, non-imam. Christian pastors. Conditional compassion. Christian leaders in Sudan offer help to Insaf only as long as she conforms to their expectations. When her past is revealed, they betray and expel her. Manipulation and betrayal. Like imams, they use their authority to control, judge, and ultimately abandon those who do not fit their moral standards. Contrast. Indian Christian family. In contrast, the Matthew family in India acts out of unconditional compassion, motivated by a more inclusive and empathetic interpretation of faith. 4. Family patriarchs, fathers, elders. Role: heads of households, primary decision-makers in marriage and family matters. Characteristics: patriarchal control. Fathers like Insaf's and Dang's wield near absolute authority, often invoking religion and tradition to justify their decisions. Enforcers of social order. They act as gatekeepers of family honor and reputation, sometimes collaborating with or deferring to imams and other authorities. Impact. Their actions are often the first barrier to Dang and Insaf's union, setting the stage for further institutional oppression. Summary table: imams versus other authority figures. Authority figure: source of power, main function, attitude toward protagonists, key traits/actions. Imams: religious law, Sharia. Judge: moral enforcer, hostile, punitive, rigid, annul marriage, enforce racial/gender norms. Police officers: state law, force law enforcement, order, hostile, corrupt, prejudice, destroy documents, harass, threaten. Secular judges: state law, courts adjudicate criminal cases, mixed, sometimes fair, often limited, swayed by social/religious pressure. Religious leaders: faith communities, spiritual/moral guidance, conditional, manipulative, offer/withdraw help, judge, expel. Family patriarchs: tradition, kinship, family head, decision-maker, controlling, shaming, punitive, arrange/annul marriages, enforce honor. Key contrasts. Imams are the ultimate arbiters of religious and social legitimacy, with the power to make or break lives through their rulings. Their authority is public, formal, and presented as divinely sanctioned. Police and secular judges may have the power of the state, but their actions are often shaped by the same prejudices and social norms that imams enforce. Religious leaders outside the Sharia court, e.g., pastors, can be just as judgmental and exclusionary, but their authority is more conditional and less formalized. Family patriarchs are the first line of authority, setting the tone for how other institutions will treat the protagonists. Conclusion. Imams in the Abominable Love are the most formal and powerful enforcers of the intersection between religion, law, and social order. Other authority figures, police, secular judges, pastors, and patriarchs, may act independently, but often reinforce or are constrained by the imam's rulings and the broader system of religious and patriarchal control. The novel uses these contrasts to highlight the pervasiveness of institutional oppression and the difficulty of finding justice or compassion within such a system. If you'd like direct quotes or a deeper comparison with a specific authority figure, let me know. Certainly. In The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, hypocrisy among authority figures, religious, legal, and social, is a recurring and central theme. The novel exposes how those in power often manipulate moral, religious, and legal codes for personal, political, or social gain, while failing to live up to the standards they impose on others. Here's an exploration with direct references from the text. 1. Religious hypocrisy, imams, ministers, and clerics. Imams and Sharia judges. The imams who preside over the Sharia court claim to be the ultimate arbiters of God's law, but their rulings are openly shaped by racial prejudice, tribalism, and patriarchal interests. They annulled Dang and Insaf's marriage not because of any true religious violation, but because of tribal inadequacy, a social construct justified with selective religious interpretation. Direct quote. When Haj Sullah challenged and confronted the chief judge of his hypocrisy, he laughed and said calmly, "I will not give him my Arab daughter in marriage." Minister of Religious Affairs. The minister interrupts the courtroom to demand punishment for Siham Khalil, the feminist lawyer, for exposing her hair and body, yet he is more concerned with public spectacle and his own authority than with justice or compassion. When challenged, he avoids eye contact and refuses to engage with the substance of Siham's arguments. Direct quote. This infidel feminist must be excluded from defending the case. More than that, she should be punished because she exposed her private parts to the public. Yet, he is silent when Siham exposes the corruption and double standards of the court. Christian clergy, Pastor David, Mrs. Holy. The Christian pastor and Mrs. Holy claim spiritual authority and moral superiority, but betray Insaf when her past is revealed. They manipulate her confession, fake evidence, and ultimately hand her over to the police, all while maintaining a facade of Christian charity. Direct quote. The evil church pastor did not keep his word and told his flock about the crimes of his Muslim maid. Mrs. Holly is the mastermind of this cunningly orchestrated conspiracy. She asked Pastor David to fake the newspaper story that revealed Ilham's past and the crimes she had committed. The truth is that there is nothing written about her in that newspaper. 2. Legal and police hypocrisy. Police officers. Police are depicted as corrupt, violent, and self-serving. They destroy Dang and Insaf's marriage certificate, accuse Insaf of prostitution, and threaten her with arrest, all while ignoring or participating in greater abuses themselves. Direct quote. The police officer Yasser Talha said that a neighbor informed him of the murder. He also claimed that he received an anonymous call informing him of the crime. He said he did not know who called him. His answers could not convince the court of his innocence. Courtroom and prosecutors. Prosecutors and judges invoke religious and social norms to justify harsh punishments for Insaf while ignoring evidence and context. They are quick to condemn her for alleged sexual transgressions, but overlook or excuse the crimes and abuses of men in power. Direct quote. The prosecutor represents the state and the prevailing social and religious norms. His arguments are characterized by moral condemnation. He urges the court to make an example of Insaf to deter others. 3. Social and community hypocrisy. Double standards for women. The community deifies the Indian landlady as a goddess of chastity for resisting rape, while vilifying Insaf as a prostitute and criminal, even when she is a victim. The same society that punishes Insaf for alleged sexual transgressions excuses or ignores the crimes of men, including attempted rape and corruption. Direct quote. The landlady's lack of condemnation, despite her affair, exposes the selective morality and double standards of the community. The landlady's virtue is constructed by her resistance and the community's need for a heroine, while Insaf's victimhood is ignored and she is scapegoated. Religious and political leaders. Leaders manipulate laws and religious doctrine for personal or political gain, rather than justice. The Minister of Religious Affairs revokes Insaf's presidential pardon for apostasy, not out of religious conviction, but to maintain control and punish dissent. Direct quote. The Minister of Religious Affairs and other religious authorities have the power to override even presidential pardons, as seen when Insaf's pardon is revoked on religious grounds. 4. Hypocrisy among diaspora and student leaders. Sudanese student leaders. The leaders of religious student groups in India and the diaspora publicly condemn Insaf for apostasy and immorality, while themselves being involved in scandals, sexual misconduct, and political infighting. Direct quote. The Muslim Brothers and the Sisters of Nozaba also brought 2 charges against the leader of Ansar al-Sunnah al-Mohammadiyah. The first is a physical crime and the second is a religious sin. The leader of Ansar al-Sunnah admitted the physical lapse, which he committed unintentionally, but denied the religious sin. Summary table: forms of hypocrisy among authority figures. Authority figure, public stance, private/actual behavior. Example from text. Imams/Sharia judges, defenders of God's law. Morality, racially prejudiced, legalistic, rigid, annul marriage for tribal inadequacy, ignore equality. Minister of religion, guardian of faith and public morals, power-seeking, avoids accountability, demands punishment for Siham, avoids her challenges. Christian clergy, charity, forgiveness, spiritual care, manipulation, betrayal, fake evidence. Pastor David fakes newspaper story, betrays Insaf. Police/prosecutors, law enforcement, justice, corruption, abuse, selective justice, destroy marriage certificate, ignore evidence. Community leaders, uphold honor, virtue, double standards, scapegoating, landlady, deified, Insaf, vilified. Diaspora student leaders, defend faith, morality, scandal, infighting, personal gain, accuse Insaf, involved in own scandals. Conclusion. The Abominable Love exposes hypocrisy as a pervasive force among authority figures, religious, legal, and social. Those who claim to uphold the highest standards of faith, law, and morality are often the very ones who manipulate, betray, and oppress the vulnerable for their own interests. The novel's critique is sharp. True justice and compassion are rare, and the greatest danger comes not from those who break the rules, but from those who enforce them selectively and self-righteously.